Hi, everybody. This is Robert, your instructor for this Political Science 201 class. We're actually going to be talking about Chapter 7 interest groups in today's video. Um, if we look at the pluralist sense, or that pluralist theory that we've been focusing on, interest groups are usually going to be considered to be good because they will be like a way to link the interest group and the individual with the government. They can act as a go-between. They could reduce divisive conflicts and also provide stability. If we think about it a little bit more detail here in the United States, it might be a little bit opposite. Um, when we talk about pluralist theory, sometimes these groups will kind of translate into some type of political demands that might come out of the situation that we've been talking about. Now, when we talk about this from an elite view, um, interest groups are usually controlled by middle and upper class biases. Upper middle class blacks led to civil rights organizations, and liberal classes draw from the university educated and academically well connected. A lot of us are members of these groups, but only a minority of us are active. So if we look at business and union organizations that exist here, we could talk about the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, the American Bankers Association, American Iron and Steel Institute. Organized labor also has a strong influence. The organized labor movement has really gained some ground with the Democratic Party and is a very much part of the efforts of funding campaigns for the Democratic Party. Um, Government employee unions have become powerful. SEIU, which is Service Employee International Union, which is a labor union here in the United States, and it has a big presence in San Diego and California, is one of the big contributors to the Democratic Party, as well as the AFL, the American Federation of Labor. We also have single issue interest groups, and one thing that's kind of important about the understanding some of these is that they basically will reflect the demands of the elitist organizations with inside uh, the interest group, and not so much of the people that are members of the interest groups. We see abortion rights groups, single issues that people are very, very committed to, whether it's the NRA, which is the National Rifle Association, Emily's List, which is an organization that seeks pro-choice candidates that are female to run for Congress, MAD, and some other pro-choice and pro-life committees that we see out there. We have civil rights organizations that have fought for inclusion, whether it's the NAACP, which is one of the oldest civil rights groups, or the Anti-Defamation League. Women's groups, the League of Women Voters, and NOW, which is probably the most famous interest group among uh, women equality rights. LGBTQ, Lambda Legal Defense and Education Fund, GLAD, Human Rights Campaign and Equality of California. Generally, when we talk about the size of the groups, large groups enhance groups' access to the legislature because usually they have more money and more resources. But if smally, highly organized groups can make a noise, they can definitely um, influence politics and government as well. Um, when we talk about single interest versus traditional interest groups, usually single interest groups will focus on one narrow concern. And with the decline of parties and the strength of parties, candidates have turned to interest groups in order to help their electoral influence grow, whether it's the NRA or NOW or one of those groups that are very popular here in the United States. Now, we're going to talk about lobbying. And lobbying is kind of the conduit between interest groups and a political candidate or a campaign or a member of Congress. These people have access, which is one of the more important things to have in politics. You have a personal contact with decision makers, right? And usually when we talk about this is a form of access is money, right? And we saw when we looked at elections how much uh, members of Congress or candidates for elected offices can be influenced by money, and as long as it's reported and as long as it's within its limits, it is totally legal. Lobbyists can have information for members of Congress to review, whether it's tracking a bill or looking at some type of polling data or some type of maybe capital that the interest group can give to the candidate to influence them. And usually a lot of these lobbyist groups and these interest groups will have former members of Congress working for them. So in a sense, they have direct contacts with members of Congress through that. Okay, so we talked about regulating the lobbies. There are certain requirements that are used to kind of keep lobbyists in check. They have to report money they spend. They have to register themselves as lobbyists. And, we talked a little bit about a political action committee last topic when we discussed Congress. One interesting thing about political action committees is political action committees are formed and they hire lobbyists to, in a sense, lobby members of Congress for their vote. PACs will generally prefer incumbents because incumbents will win about 90% of the time. And that's interest groups. One thing to look here, and I have our Open Secrets website up. One thing to look is if we look at each of these industries, you can see how much money they've given to candidates as far as lobbying. The finance industry has given close to $1 billion in 2017 to 2018 to lobby. Health is another big one, and we could see more and more how influential these organizations are. And if you click on that and you see money to Congress, and we look at the top 20 members of Congress, it'll tell you how much the finance, insurance, real estate has given. As we can see, Beto O'Rourke has gotten $4 million from the finance industry. Claire McCaskill and a bunch of other members of Congress. It's not really, party specific unless you get into a single issue interest group. But if you look at this, you can see how much money is involved in this. Okay, so that's interest groups. For the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Congress, and we'll look at some of the duties of Congress and how specifically a bill becomes a law. Okay, we'll see you soon.